But my Bible doesn't have that Hebrew word. My Bible is the English Bible. I don't speak Hebrew.
Good.
So tell me, Cliff, where am I supposed to look?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat, because this one is a genuine chess match. In this video, a Christian apologist named Cliff goes head-to-head with a skeptic over one massive question. Can you actually trust the Bible when it only means something after a human decides how to read it? What starts as a calm conversation about translation turns into a corner Cliff did not see coming, and the skeptic closes it out with a single quiet point about how people inherit their faith that is honestly hard to argue with. Do yourself a favor and stick around all the way through, because the strongest moment is not at the start, it builds, and the payoff near the end is the part everyone will be talking about. Also, I'm always curious who's tuning in, so drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're watching from. It genuinely makes my day to see how far this community reaches. Alright, enough from me, let's get into it.
I guess, Cliff, the problem is not what you've just said. It's that I don't see that in your friends.
Guess what? That's not an excuse to reject Christ. Just because I got bad friends doesn't mean you have a right to reject Christ.
But if I can spot a systematic problem that a lot of Christians do, we might make the point that there's a systematic problem with Christianity as a religion. That's how we find thematic failures, in the multiple failures of the individuals. Fair?
So dishonest, it's scary. When a man says to me, the reason I'm not Muslim is because of 9/11, I look that dude in the face and say, you know, you are a narrow-minded bigot.
He is.
Good. So just because some Muslims dynamite the World Trade Center says nothing about Muhammad.
What if all
It says a lot about those terrorists. Just because Christians do some boneheaded evil things tells you nothing about Jesus Christ.
Well, where do I look?
Tells you a lot about them.
Where do I look for
The
examples?
Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
But there is such a massive amount of interpretation in the Christian faith on the Gospels. Let's start there. It's fair to say that there's a lot of interpretation in the source, right? We interpret it different ways.
Yeah.
Okay. That's new, by the way. I don't think there was a lot of interpretation in older religions, right? I mean, there was a text and you followed that text.
There have always been different interpretations of everything.
Okay.
History, mathematics,
Fair. Not even a big point.
psychology,
Not even a big point.
family life. There's always been different views and interpretations.
There's a lot of different interpretations.
Yeah, of everything.
Okay. That means that I can't go to the source text to see what Christianity is because I don't know until you interpret it.
You don't know until I interpret?
Well, let's see. Okay, you talked about the Ten Commandments. You talked about thou shalt not kill, right? Your interpretation was it wasn't thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. And murder in turn means this. How would I have known that? That wasn't
Very
in the
simply,
text.
because before I said that, I said, read in the Hebrew language the commandment, you shall not kill. In the Hebrew, it's real clear. It's talking about murder. Secondly, read the chapter after that, which is talking about executing people.
Okay.
So both from the Hebrew word and from the context, you know the commandment, you shall not kill, is not talking about killing in order to preserve the innocent from being slaughtered. You know it's talking about murder. You shall not murder.
Okay.
Fair
I
enough?
see what you're saying. But my Bible doesn't have that Hebrew word. My Bible is the English Bible. And I
That's
don't
right.
speak Hebrew.
Good.
Tell me, Cliff, where am I supposed to look?
It's real simple, sir.
Because
If you are intelligent enough,
I don't speak Hebrew. I'm sorry, I'm dumb.
if you are intelligent enough to have a problem with a text, you are intelligent enough to go and study it harder.
Cliff, I'm not going to force it to make sense if it doesn't make sense.
It's not a question of forcing it to make sense. It's a question of if you are so sharp intellectually that you can be skeptical about a certain issue, you are more than intelligent enough to go and pursue evidence that shows either that's a bunch of rubbish or it's true.
Okay, if I find nothing wrong with my version, do I still have a responsibility to go back and look at the original document, the Hebrew?
If you have a genuine problem
No, I don't
with
have
the language, yes, you better go back and study the original language. If I have a genuine problem with the language in the Quran, I better have the intellectual credibility to learn Arabic and study the Quran in its original language. But I don't have any problem with the Quran's language. I think it's crystal clear. I have a philosophical problem with Islam. That's why I'm not Muslim.
Okay. My question, I'm going to say it again. If I don't have a problem with what I'm reading in the English Bible, do I have a responsibility to still read the Hebrew one?
No.
So that I may better understand it.
No, obviously not.
Okay, well that's a problem for me because I think that you should be responsible for seeking the truth. And there is more truth to be found in the English Bible. Just like there is more truth to be found in the Bible you read today. There are tons of other books that were excluded from the Bible, and yet you see no need to advise them to read those.
That is totally false.
Watch how fast this gets uncomfortable for Cliffe. The skeptic isn't attacking individual Christians, he is making a much sharper point, and Cliffe completely misreads it. When the skeptic says he can spot a systematic problem that a lot of Christians do, and that this might point to a systematic problem with Christianity as a religion, that is not bigotry. That is basic pattern recognition. If a method keeps producing the same failure, you are allowed to ask questions about the method. Cliffe calling that scary and dishonest is dodging, not answering. And then comes the part that should bother any honest believer. The skeptic points out that he cannot go to the source text to see what Christianity actually is, because he doesn't know until someone interprets it for him. Sit with that. If the truth of God needs a human middleman to decode it, then you are not following the text. You're following the interpreter. That is a huge admission, and Cliffe basically agrees interpretation comes first. So the skeptic asks the simplest, most reasonable question in the whole exchange. He looks at Cliffe and asks where he is supposed to look. He doesn't read Hebrew. He has an English Bible. Where does the average person actually go? And here's what gets me. Cliffe has no clean answer. He pivots to comments about how intelligent you are instead of giving directions. Then the trap closes. The skeptic asks if he has a responsibility to study the original Hebrew even when his English version reads fine, and Cliffe answers no, obviously not. You cannot preach that the real truth is buried in the original languages and then tell people they never need to look there. That is the contradiction.
Well,
I have been asked out here very thoughtfully, Cliffe, why do you not accept the Gnostic Gospels? Why do you not accept the Apocrypha? And I've answered very clearly why I accept the 27 New Testament books. Are you interested in hearing that answer?
oh yes, please.
Great. The 27 New Testament books that we have were not picked by some council. The 27 New Testament books that we have were decided upon by the worldwide church over a period of 200 years.
Effective.
The tests that they used were three in number. First of all, was the document written by an apostle or by someone who knew an apostle? Secondly, was the document consistently orthodox? Meaning by that, did it hold to the Old Testament orthodox truth and to the oral tradition of the apostles, the Orthodox Christian faith? Third test, was it used universally by the church, not just in North Africa, not just in Antioch, not just in Rome, but around the known world, the Mediterranean?
Okay.
Was it used universally? Matthew through Revelation was agreed upon. The Gnostic Gospels were rejected. Why? Because Gnosticism is based on the philosophical presupposition, your body is evil, your spirit is good.
Yes.
Therefore, the hero of the Gospel of Judas is Judas Iscariot. Why is Judas Iscariot the hero? The body is evil, right? So Judas Iscariot helped Jesus get rid of his body. Bravo, Judas, you're the hero. That is a violent contradiction of the Orthodox faith taught in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. The body is good. It's a gift from God, the Bible teaches. Gnosticism is a philosophical perversion of what the Bible teaches.
Perversion is a strong word, and I'm sure you realize
Twisting, perversion,
Still,
wrong.
It's a very strong word, and I think it raises an interesting point. Okay, I know that one of the things you said was they need to know an apostle or be an apostle.
Yeah.
Right, now, was the Gnostic one, which kind of crime did it commit to warrant being thrown out?
First of all, it obviously contradicted the Orthodox faith by saying that physical is evil and spiritual is good.
Is that the reason?
That's the starting point. Then obviously the Gnostic Gospels were not written by somebody probably who knew an apostle even,
Probably.
because the earliest manuscript evidence that we have for the Gnostic Gospels begins in middle part of the 2nd century.
But Cliff, the Gnostic Gospels, stories were a big part of that. And, until a while, they didn't write anything down. So, I mean, there's no reason to suspect that it wasn't written earlier.
There is no manuscript evidence that shows that the Gnostic Gospels were written in the 1st century. All the manuscript evidence points to the Gnostic Gospels being written in the 2nd century.
Okay, who do the Gnostic Gospels claim as their source? I don't know.
Well, they're pseudepigraphal, meaning by that they attach the name of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter. Man, you should read the Gospel of Peter.
Should probably read all of them, right?
Sure.
I mean,
But I haven't done that, so I'm just asking you to start with the Gospel of Peter.
Okay.
The reason I ask you to do that is
Matthew.
because the Gospel of Peter talks about the resurrection. And it uses embellished language. Which is why, if anybody ever says to you, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are legendary, mythological, they don't know what they're talking about. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The resurrection, it's about 8 to 15 verses. Here are the facts. No interpretation, no embellishment. You read the Gospel of Peter, you got a large crowd of people around the tomb of Christ. You got 2 angels coming down, rolling the stone aside, going in, coming out. Their heads go up to the clouds. Jesus is between him. His head goes through the clouds, and then the cross follows them, saying, speaking. So you got a speaking cross coming out in the Gospel of Peter. That's what you call legend. That's what you call embellished language. In stark contrast to that is Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24, John 20, which talk about the resurrection of Christ in very precise, short language.
Now, Cliff thinks this is his strongest stretch, and honestly, he sounds confident here. But listen to what he is actually admitting. He explains that these books were decided upon by the worldwide church over a period of 200 years. Read that again. 200 years. Human beings debating and filtering and deciding over centuries which books count as the Word of God. That is not a delivery from the sky. That is a committee. And the moment you admit a committee shaped the collection, you admit humans shaped the religion. Then Cliff lays out his tests, and the first one is whether the document was written by an apostle or by someone who knew an apostle. Here is the problem. The 4 Gospels he keeps are themselves anonymous. The names got attached generations later. So the same suspicion Cliff throws at the rejected books can be turned right back on the ones he accepts. You don't get to use a standard that only ever points outward. To be fair, Cliff makes a genuinely interesting point about embellishment. He says the Gospel of Peter talks about the resurrection and uses embellished language, including a literal talking cross walking out of the tomb. And yeah, that is clearly legend. But here is what people don't realize. Once you admit ancient religious texts got wilder as the years passed, you have handed the skeptic the exact tool he needs to ask why the approved accounts get a free pass. The skeptic even raises that the stories circulated by mouth for a long time before anyone wrote anything down, so there's no reason to suspect the rejected ones weren't written earlier. Cliff brushes it off, but that question is completely fair.
Okay, I can appreciate that. There's something to be said about allowing embellished language into something that's going to serve as the cornerstone for our faith. I think that's a risky move, but that's not a huge problem. I'm willing to accept that, we can treat it as both, literary and historical. What I'm concerned, and this is actually something I'd like you to evaluate. Do you think that the Bible is prone to misinterpretation?
I know that every written book is prone to misinterpretation. Every book.
So yes, you do.
Every book is easily misinterpreted.
Okay, so the Bible is easily misinterpreted. Now,
Yes.
as a separate question, do we teach Christians, I say we because, for a long time, do we teach Christian children to follow the word of the Bible?
I teach them to follow Jesus Christ and to read the Bible in order to get to know Christ, in order to get to know God better. In other words, one of the differences between me and my Muslim friends is the following. The miracle in Islam is the book, the Quran.
I've heard this, yes.
The miracle in Christianity is not the book, the Bible. The miracle in Christianity is God becoming a human being in Jesus Christ. That's the miracle.
You're right there, Cliff. Islam does treat the Quran as a holy entity.
Right.
Yes.
That's the miracle of Islam.
Okay, but presumably there was a time you were teaching your children about Christianity before they were able to properly and effectively interpret the Bible.
Yeah.
At that time, did you read the Bible verbatim, or did you teach that lesson according to your interpretation of the Bible?
To the best of my ability, I took what the Bible says and dumbed it down into language that my children could understand. And then when they got older, I said, you know something, guys? You're not going to be able to believe in Jesus because Dad believes in Jesus. You're going to have to think this one through for yourself. And to be honest with you, my middle son struggled with a ton of doubts. And he was very honest about it. And we talked hard and long about it. And I celebrated that and never criticized him for his doubts, because I think if we're all honest, we all have doubts, beginning with me.
Okay.
I have doubts.
I admire you. I admire you for that. That's very admirable.
Thank you.
The problem is that, well, the truth of the matter is that the majority of Christians, their parents were Christian. That is a fact, okay? So it seems to me that it seems extremely likely that your kids probably believe the majority of the interpretation of the Bible that you have. And that's true for most Christians.
This is where it all lands, and it lands hard. The skeptic asks Cliffe straight up whether the Bible is prone to misinterpretation, and Cliffe says every written book is prone to misinterpretation. Every book. He concedes it. The single most important document in his entire worldview, the thing billions of people build their lives around, and he agrees it is easily misread. Think about what that does to the idea of a clear divine message. If a perfect God wanted to communicate something that mattered for eternity, why deliver it in a form that even its biggest defender admits gets twisted constantly? But the skeptic saves the sharpest cut for last, and it is so calm you could almost miss how devastating it is. He points out that the majority of Christians had parents who were Christian, and that this is simply a fact. Then he says it seems extremely likely that Cliffe's own kids believe the same interpretation of the Bible that Cliffe handed them. No yelling, no insult, just a mirror held up to the whole thing. And here is why that matters so much. Belief that travels almost perfectly from parent to child is not evidence of truth. It is evidence of inheritance. You have to understand, this is the pattern across nearly every faith on the planet. People overwhelmingly land in the religion of the family and region they were born into. A child raised in one place grows up certain about one God. The very same child raised somewhere else grows up just as certain about a different one, and both are convinced they found the answer. That is not how truth behaves. That is how upbringing behaves. That is the whole game right there. Cliffe is clearly thoughtful and sincere, and I actually respect that he let his son wrestle with doubt instead of shutting it down. But being sincere is not the same as being correct. And when your beliefs match the household you grew up in almost exactly, the honest question stops being, how do I defend this? The honest question becomes, would I believe any of it at all if I had simply been born somewhere else? So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.